You know what's crazier than turning down $20 million? Turning it down, and somehow triggering a leadership crisis in the league you're supposedly saving. Because that's the story people keep whispering about right now. Caitlin Clark had money on the table, real, headline-making money, and she still chose to step back. No victory lap, no dramatic announcement, just a quiet no. And the second she did, the WNBA's biggest unanswered question got even louder. If the league can't properly handle the star bringing in the new era, then who exactly is in control? That's why the commissioner rumors won't die. Not because one player skipped a side league, but because that decision exposed something the WNBA has been trying to hide in plain sight. The league is exploding in attention, while its infrastructure, leadership, and labor relationships are under more pressure than ever at the exact same time. And the money? That was just the spark. Everyone keeps repeating the same number, $20 million. Whether that figure came from stacked offers, incentives, equity talk, or long-term projections almost doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what that number represents. It publicly reset Caitlin Clark's value on the open market. And once that happened, this stopped being about personal choices and started being about power. Because the moment people realized Clark could make exponentially more money outside the WNBA, a dangerous question followed. If the league's biggest draw doesn't financially need the league, then the league suddenly needs to justify why staying is worth it. That's where Ice Cube's offer shook everything loose. It wasn't just about cash. It was about optics. $5 million for a limited run, fewer games, less wear and tear, and instant headlines. Whether she accepted or not, the damage was already done. The comparison was unavoidable. One league was saying, "We'll treat you like a main event." The other was still explaining why patience was required. And when patience has been the answer for nearly 3 decades, people stopped listening. Then came the bigger shift. The one that really made league offices uncomfortable. The rise of player-first alternatives. Unrivaled didn't present itself like a gimmick. It positioned itself as a solution. Shorter season, domestic base, cleaner presentation, and most importantly, language that changes everything. Ownership, equity, partnership. Even if the details get debated, the idea alone is powerful. Because once players believe they can be partners instead of assets, the old leverage disappears overnight. The WNBA used to be the only mountaintop. Now it's the biggest one, but it's no longer the only path upward. That's why Caitlin Clark saying no mattered so much. It wasn't passive. It wasn't burnout. It was a calculated pause. She proved she doesn't chase money. Money chases her. And that realization rippled through the entire league. Because if Clark doesn't need to jump at the first bag, she can afford to play the long game. And once one player proves that's possible, every negotiation changes. Every conversation shifts. Every excuse gets re-examined. This is where leadership entered dangerous territory. Fans tend to think leadership is about deals, expansion, and press releases. Players experience leadership differently. They experience it through tone, protection, and trust. When fan discourse got ugly, when rivalries turned personal, when narratives spun out of control, players waited for the league to step in and draw a hard line. Not a corporate one, a human one. And when that didn't happen the way players expected, trust cracked. Because neutrality doesn't feel neutral when you're the one absorbing the hits. From there, everything became combustible. Travel issues, scheduling, officiating, media narratives, pay, respect. Every unresolved frustration piled onto the same pressure point. Behind closed doors, the tension only grew. This isn't just about raises anymore. It's about structure. Players see the revenue climbing. They see sold-out arenas, spiking ratings, billion-dollar media deals. And they're asking why the system still treats them like the league is barely surviving. That's why any suggestion that players should be grateful lands like a slap. Gratitude is what you ask for when you don't want to pay full value. And Caitlin Clark became the proof players needed, without ever saying a word. She didn't fight online. She didn't clap back. She didn't explain herself. She played, broke records, packed arenas, then stepped away quietly while the entire league argued around her. That silence did more damage than any tweet ever could. Because silence forces everyone else to reveal themselves. The league talked. The union talked. The media talked. The veterans talked. And through it all, Clark's leverage grew without her lifting a finger. That's why the upcoming CBA negotiations loom so large. This isn't just another contract cycle. This is a referendum on the future of women's basketball. The players opted out because they know this is the moment, not later. Now, the money is here. The audience is here. The attention is finally locked in. And once players believe they're the ones driving the engine, they stop accepting old rules. That's where alternative leagues become dangerous. Not because they replace the WNBA overnight, but because they expose what's possible. They don't need to be bigger. They just need to be freer. And every time the league stumbles, every time leadership sounds out of touch, those alternatives gain ground without even trying. This is why the commissioner rumors persist. Not because one decision went wrong, but because leadership feels misaligned with the moment. Change doesn't always come because someone failed. Sometimes it comes because the era demands something different. And that brings everything back to Caitlin Clark. Her rejection of that money wasn't loyalty. It wasn't rebellion. It was leverage. By staying, she forced the league to confront itself. By leaving later, if it comes to that, she would take the momentum with her. So when you hear Caitlin Clark rejected $20 million, don't get distracted by the number. That's the bait. The real story is what that rejection exposed. The WNBA is growing faster than its systems, its leadership, and its labor relationships can handle. And when a league is expanding this fast, it only takes one wrong offseason to turn a golden era into chaos. Because Clark doesn't have to threaten anyone. Her options are the threat. And everyone knows it. The players know it. The networks know it. The fans can feel it. This next stretch will decide whether the WNBA becomes a modern powerhouse or a league that let its biggest moments slip through its fingers. So here's the real question. If Caitlin Clark said no to $20 million when things were tense, do you really think she'll keep saying no if the disrespect keeps stacking up? That's why the WNBA is officially on the clock. And the next move they make could change women's basketball forever. If part 1 was about Caitlin Clark's leverage, then part 2 is about what happens when a league realizes, too late, that the balance of power has already shifted. Because while fans were arguing online and headlines were chasing clicks, something much more serious was happening quietly behind the scenes. The WNBA didn't just face criticism this season. It faced a realization it wasn't ready for. The old rules don't work anymore. For decades, the WNBA operated on a simple structure. Limited revenue meant limited pay. Growth was slow, expectations were modest, and players were constantly told the same thing. This is just how it is. But Caitlin Clark broke that illusion. Not by demanding anything, not by threatening to leave, but by showing the world what her value looks like when the market isn't artificially capped. And once that door opened, it couldn't be closed again. Because here's the part that makes league executives nervous. Clark didn't accept the outside money, but she didn't shut the door on it either. She proved those opportunities are real. She proved they're viable. And most importantly, she proved they're waiting. That means the WNBA is no longer negotiating from a position of control. It's negotiating from a position of urgency. This is where the CBA situation turns from business as usual into a ticking time bomb. When the players opted out, it wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. They didn't opt out because they were angry. They opted out because the timing was perfect. Media deals are locked in. Ratings are up. Expansion is on the table. Jerseys are selling out. The league is finally printing money instead of defending itself. And players are asking a very simple question. If the league is thriving now, why are we still being treated like it's struggling? This is where the conversation stops being polite. Revenue sharing is no longer a suggestion. It's the foundation of the fight. Players don't want promises anymore. They want percentages. They want transparency. They want guarantees that this growth actually reaches the people filling the arenas. And the league knows it can't stall forever. Because the moment a work stoppage becomes realistic, the pressure multiplies. Fans won't tolerate it. Networks won't tolerate it. Sponsors definitely won't tolerate it. Which leads to the most uncomfortable truth of all. The WNBA's biggest weakness right now isn't competition. It's credibility. You can't market stars as cultural icons while negotiating with them like they're replaceable. You can't celebrate record-breaking attendance while arguing poverty behind closed doors. And you can't ask players to be patient when the entire sports world sees the money flowing. That contradiction is what players are pushing back against. And Caitlin Clark sits at the center of it, whether she wants to or not, because she represents the future and the alternative. If the league adapts, she becomes the face of a golden era. If the league resists, she becomes the proof that the system is outdated. And here's what makes this even more dangerous for the league. Clark doesn't need to lead a revolt. She doesn't need to organize anything. All she has to do is exist in a system that underpays her, while others line up to overpay her. That's the quiet pressure no press conference can fix. Now zoom out even further, because this isn't just about one player or one contract. This is about control. For the first time, women's basketball players are realizing they don't need a single centralized gatekeeper. They can build off-season leagues. They can control their branding. They can negotiate collectively from a place of strength instead of fear. And once that mindset spreads, the league's monopoly starts to crack. That doesn't mean the WNBA disappears, but it does mean it stops being the unquestioned final destination. And leagues hate that, because once players have options, everything costs more. Compliance costs more. Stability costs more. Keeping stars happy costs more. That's why leadership matters so much right now. Not just competence, alignment. The next commissioner, or the current one if she survives, won't just manage schedules and deals. They'll manage trust. They'll manage perception. They'll manage a generation of players who know their worth and aren't afraid to test it. And if leadership gets that wrong, the fallout won't be immediate. It'll be gradual. Fewer sacrifices, shorter commitments, more side projects, more off-season alternatives that slowly become real competitors. By the time the league reacts, the culture will already be gone. That's the warning Caitlin Clark's decision quietly delivered. She didn't reject the money to prove loyalty. She rejected it to prove freedom. Freedom to choose. Freedom to wait. Freedom to force change without saying a word. So now the league stands at a crossroads. Adapt fast, share the growth, modernize the system, and lock in this era for a generation. Or cling to old frameworks and hope stars keep accepting less than their worth. Because if the WNBA gets this wrong, it won't lose Caitlin Clark overnight. It'll lose control slowly. And by the time people realize what's happening, the league won't be fighting to keep one star. It'll be fighting to keep relevance. And that's a battle no amount of PR can win. If this breakdown made things click for you, you'll want to stick around. This story isn't done, and the next chapter is going to be even messier than this one. So hit subscribe, and we'll walk through what happens next together.